Hey buddy, so what is clean architecture? Well, before you jump into clean architecture, do you know what is architecture? Okay, so architecture is just a way of keeping your code in different folders and then how those folders communicate with each other, right? Every folder is designed for a specific purpose. So, if you look at your house, drawing room is specifically designed to attend the guest. Kitchen is specifically designed to cook a food, and then bedrooms are for sleep, right? Same in your coding world. Every folder that you will create or every class library that you will create is for some specific purpose, right? And then how those different class library are going to communicate with each other, that is all about the architecture, right? So architecture enables you that if tomorrow there is any requirement change, it would be easy for you to adopt, and that helps you to keep your code clean and manageable and easy to maintain, right? So when there is a change, it's easy to fix, it's easy to adopt, or with less effort you can adopt the new stuff or you can fix the bugs, right? Okay, this clean architecture was specifically designed on three layers mainly. One was the domain layer, that was the center part. Second was application layer, and then third, the external part is consist of many parts, right? On external layer, architecture says you can keep your presentation layer, you can keep your database, you can keep your external APIs call, that is called infrastructure layer, right? And then unit test, integration test, all the other layers you can keep on the external orbit. Okay, now let's jump into code and let's try to understand how cleanly we can design the clean architecture, right? So when we call clean architecture, that means for sure it will help you to keep your code clean, right? So now let's look into the code part. So here we are in the Visual Studio and we will create a clean architecture from scratch. Okay, and we will take help of paint as well. So if you look over the internet, you will see there are diagrams and that diagram confuse, right? So what we will do, we will create diagram and the Visual Studio code parallelly. Okay, so the first layer and the center layer that in clean architecture is domain layer. So let's draw our domain layer and we will call it domain, right? So now let's go to Visual Studio and we will create one folder and we will call it a domain, right? So in domain, now we have to create a project, right? So let's add a new project and I will say what? I will create a class library, right? So let's create a class library and let's name it, this is my domain service, right? So this is my domain service. Okay, so this is my, okay, I'm good, just create it and we are good, right? So every layer we would have our own dependency injection, right? So let's rename this class to dependency injection. So we have this class, right, called dependency injection. So rename it, yes, come on, yeah, dependency injection. So we will implement it later, right? But this is our domain service. Now the domain service, when you create domain service, you have to make sure domain service is not going to refer any project, right? If you look at this diagram, the first, this is going to be the center one, right? And in the domain, there is not going to be any business logic. Domain was specifically built to deal with database, deal with entity framework, right? So every entity framework. So let's say we wanted to create some entities, so we will create here folder called entities, entities, right? So inside these entities you can create as many as entity you want, right? And then there is entity configuration, entity mapping, all those configuration, right? Everything which is related to entity you can keep inside domain service, right? So let's say entity, and this is my entity configuration, right? So there is a folder called entity and configuration that will make all the entity configuration. So we will not implement that entity part, right? Our objective is to understand the concept, but at least I can give you the idea what are the folders that you can keep, right? Inside domain, you would have everything for the entities, right? All the entities models here, all the entity configurations here, and then there would be a context class as well if you need, right? So there should be a class called db context that would also be part of this one, this domain service, right? And domain service would have their own service, right? So, and let's create a folder called services, right? So now this service is specifically deal with database. You will go to your database through entity framework and it will make a context call. For example, if there is a table or there is an entity called person, you need to fetch data from person, then here in the service there would be a class called let's say person service, right? And in the person service you will make a method that will go to context and fetch the data from person entity, right? So get person. Okay, so everything related to database or entity that will be under domain service. Now we need one more folder, the other layer that clean architecture says, that is application. So on top of domain there is one more, and that is application, right? So what I will do, I will create one more here and I will say this is my application layer, right? Now that means in a Visual Studio I need to create one more folder and I will say here, hey, this is my application, right? Same here, I will create a new project that would be my class library. My class library, here you go, and I will name it, this is application service, right? So this is my application service, and let's say next, and let's say create. Okay, so we are good with application service. So this class library is created. Now similar to domain, we will create different folders. So now domain has no business logic, it is only built to communicate with your database. All the database, right? If you wanted to deal with your entity, your database, you have to go through domain. Now application, every business logic that needs to be done, right? Whatever your client requirement was, according to your client requirement, you have to write the code inside application service, right? That is why the name says application, right? Now you're going to build an application. For that application there is a requirement, that requirement you are going to draw here in your application service, right? In clean architecture, application service is designed to deal with application logic for sure, but on the use cases, right? So what you can do here, over here you can create a folder called use cases, and inside use cases you can design different use cases. For example, there is a module called user management, right? So inside use case you will create one use case and you will call it that I wanted to deal with user management, right? Everything related to user you can come here and you can place here, right? So let's say I wanted to deal with user service, right? And here you go. Over here, so since you have user service, let's create one more folder here, and I will say this is my interfaces, right? So every interface would be under this interface folder. So let's create a class here, class, and I will say this is my iUser service, right? And over here I will declare, let's say say public, say string, and I wanted to get user. A very simple method, right? And that's it. So you know what, this is class, so I have to make it interface. Here you go, and now it is happy. Okay, now let's implement this, and yes, save it and implement here in a user service class, right? So come on, implement it, implement an interface, right? So for now what I will do, I will say return a simple thing that would be just a name, right? So let's say code with Praveen Yadav, right? So a simple method. Okay, now over here, now anything inside user service, you have get user, you can add user, you can delete user, whatever method you want, but that would be inside this user management, right? How you wanted to deal. If there is tomorrow, there is a fund management inside use cases, you can create a folder called fund management, and there you can add your classes. If you wanted a model, that would be here, right, inside user management, right? Okay, now what are the other things that you need inside your application service? You may need a folder called helper, right? You may need a folder called constants, right? I'm in the wrong place, come on, let's delete this, I don't need it here. Okay, now here, so let's add a folder, come on here. Okay, so let's say I need constants, right? I need mapper as well, right? I may need mapper as well, so I will create a folder here called mapper, right? So anything that is related to your application service you can keep here, right? Now we would have DI for this as well, right? So we need a dependency injection for our this layer as well, right? So here we have class 1, we will convert into dependency injection, and we will rename this to dependency injection. So every layer is going to have their own dependency injection, right? That is a way of keeping your dependency injection even clean. Okay, now what is next? The other layer is external layer, right? So now that is the biggest part. So here let's say there are different now parts in external. The one part is the infrastructure layer, right? So we need one layer called infrastructure layer, right? So here you go, this is infrastructure layer, right? So now we will come here and we will create one more folder and we will call it infrastructure. So let's call it infrastructure, right? Now the job of infrastructure, why this infrastructure is needed. Now any third-party API, you need to make a call from your application that you are going to hold here, that you are going to create here. That is why it is being called infrastructure, right? The first thing, let's add a class library here, right? I will say new project, right? And over here I will add a new class library and I will call it I will call it external APIs, right? So every external API I will call here. So I'm calling it external APIs. So now in external APIs I may have Google API, right, that I need to make a call, and I may have Facebook API, right? So any external API that I need to make a call, that I will place in external APIs under infrastructure, right? Now it is not necessary that when I say external API, it is just a third-party API like Google API, Facebook API, or any other thing. It could be your API that is not part of this project. For this project, the other API that you have created, that is an external API. So you place here, you will create one class and you will make a call to that class from here, right? Now you could also place your database here. So what I will do, because database is also an external thing, a device, external thing, right? External memory. So what I will do, can create here and I can create a database project. So I will say this is my database project, right? Or any name that you wanted to give. So this is my database project, right? And in this database project, you can create your tables as per your project need, your stored procedure, any database thing, right? This would be just structure. This would be just infra of your database here. Now, let's say you also need a logging, right? So even the logging thing you will place here, because that is also going to be external if you are going to implement, third party, for example, Siri log, right? Or any other log. So that is going to be external. So what I will do, I will place that inside our infra, because that is also part of my infrastructure. So I will say here, this is my logging. So next and create, and your logging implementation would be here. Now, similar to infrastructure, there is one more layer. There is parallel layer, that is a presentation layer. So what I will do here, let me find this and I will divide into different parts, right? So I will call it now a presentation layer, right? So presentation layer. Now what is presentation layer? So presentation layer that is responsible to present data to customer or to end user, right? So it would be your API or it could be your UI as well, right? It's all up to you. Since this is our API project, so in our case, it would be just API, right? So this is my API project. So what I will do here, let me rename it to .api, right? And this is my presentation layer. So what I will do here, I will create one more folder here and I will say name it presentation, right? And let's move this clean project API inside the presentation. Now, well, this is your clean architecture folder structure. So domain, right? If you look at this diagram, domain is the center part. That means no domain is not referring any other project, any other class library, but domain is being called from application, right? So we will go to Visual Studio, inside application, and here we will add what here dependencies. We will add a project reference to to domain service, right? So okay, here you go. Now we have this domain service as a project reference, right? Now let's go next. Application is being called from, it could be called from infrastructure layer, it could be called from presentation layer, right? So in our project, we know that, presentation is our web API, and whenever there is a call to web API will deal with the application, the business logic, right? So what we will do here, presentation layer will make a call to application, right? So go here, presentation, and we have web API, we have dependencies, and we will add a project reference to application service, to our business logic, right? Now this is done. Now what was the next? Now this infrastructure layer. Now if you look at this, looks like presentation layer and infrastructure layer on the same level. That means any one of them can call application, right? So it is here a two-way. So normally infrastructure is designed for your infra setup, for your logging, right? For your database infrastructure setup, or your external APIs call. And in our project, every business logic is over here inside application. So what we will do, everything related to infrastructure, we will make a call from application, right? We do not want our presentation layer to make a direct call to infrastructure, right? We wanted to go through application and we wanted to access the infrastructure. So what we will do here, we will go here and inside the application, we will add one more project reference and we will make a call to external APIs and let's say logging as well, right? So logging, and now you can access, external APIs logging from application, and then application is being called from presentation layer, right? Okay, now apart from these, right, infrastructure, presentation layer, there are more. For example, unit test and integration test. So if you are working with the unit test, integration test, so that will come here as a part of, a part of external layer. One part is presentation, second part is infrastructure, third part would be your tests, right? So here let's call it tests, right? And over here you can create one more folder and you will name it a new solution folder and name it tests, and inside test you can create your unit test, you can create your integrations test. Your clean architecture is ready. This is the whole diagram, right? So if you wanted to make it more beautiful, what you can do, you can go and find the paint and put some different colors, right? So here you go. I'm just picking some random color to make it to differentiate it. Okay, here you go. So this is your clean architecture ready, right? Similar here. Now what, we are left with that our dependency injection. So let's go to dependency injection, right? So here you go. Okay, now we will create this should be our static class. So let's say static class, create a method static as well. So let's say static static, no, so let's say static, and let's say add dependency for what, this is my application, right? Application. Okay, so and what, but I'm going to create an extension method, right? So I will call it from this. So the first thing I will say this, and I will say iService collection. Now to add this iService collection, I need a one nugget package. So I will go here and I will say manage nugget package, and we need Microsoft dependency injection package. So here you go. This is the latest preview. I don't need a preview version, right? So we will go for the stable version and I will install it, right? So I'm going to keep this name with me, and I should have this one now. Here you go, right? Okay, now you know what I will say, this is your service. So this is service collection. I will give a better name, right? So here at the end I will just return the whole service collection, right? And it should be happy. Oh, it is not, because you know why? Because I need to say the return type would be same. Okay, here you go. Now in the application we had, you know what, we had our use cases, a service called user service, and interface was iUser service, right? So I will say let's say service collection dot, at this time I will say add scoped, right? And I will say this is my iUser service and this is my class user service, right? And this is my dependency injection, right? I'm resolving the dependency here. Okay, one bracket is missing for this class. Okay, so my dependency injection for application is ready. Okay, now you know what, similar thing we need in a domain, right? Because domain is being only called in application service, right? So what we need to do here in the dependency injection, same thing we will do, but before that we need a node project reference. We need to add a manage nugget package, and let's go there in the browse and we will say paste this one, right? So again the stable version we will pick. So here you go, install it, right? So this is installed. Okay, now same thing. So to save some time, I will go to application service, I go to this one, I will copy this, I will go to domain once again and I will paste it here, right? So instead of application I will call it here now a domain, right? So here you go, and this is my dependency injection. I don't have anything here, right? So I will just leave it empty. But if we have, you know, some class, we will resolve the dependency here, right? Now let's say what it's saying, we need to make it static. Not here, this class needs to make a static, right? So here you go, it should be happy now. Here you go. So we have created dependency injection for domain, we have created dependency injection for application. This dependency injection cannot be directly called in a presentation layer, right, in the program.cs class. So we need to go to here, and over here what we will do, we will make a call to service collection dot, and then we will name a method, this one, dependency for a domain, right? And then you are good. It won't work for now. The reason is I need to add a namespace. So I will call it using this namespace. Here you go. It is happy now, right? So dependency injection of domain layer is being called in dependency injection of application layer, right? So from here everything is being returned. Now over here in the program.cs class, here we will say builder, and we will resolve our dependency for application. Builder dot services dot add dependency for application. Here you go, right? So builder dot build. So this I believe needs to be here, right? Because I have to resolve the dependency, then I have to say build, right? Now let's try. So it broke. I think we did some mistake. The service collection cannot be modified because it is read only. You know what? The first thing that I see, I declared a interface and interface. So that is wrong. So one need a interface and needs to resolve with a class, right? So my service class. So make it fixed. So now let's try one more time. This time it works fine. Here you go, right? So I have proceed to localhost, and here you go, hello world. And you know what? Here if you look at the program.class, the default routing is this, right? Okay, so that's all for today's video. I will see you in the next video.